Um, Great. Well, good afternoon, or if you are on the West Coast or in the Pacific Northwest, good morning. I'm Aubrey Lyons Warren. I'm the Director of Cross-Sector Initiatives at CLAPA. That's how we pronounce that acronym, the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities. We're so glad that you all can join us. If you didn't have a chance to do so already, and thank you so much to those of you who have, if you're able to just change your Zoom name to include your organization, that's really helpful for our presenters to know who's in the room. And if you need any assistance with that, feel free to send us a message. So I think just a couple quick announcements from our end. Hopefully you all saw the save the date for our annual HousingIs Summit. It's May 9th and 10th in Washington, D.C. We will likely be launching registration in January, so look out for that. And I know a couple of you, I'm just scanning who's in the room, submitted proposals for the summit. So we'll be getting those emails out this week and next, but really a great looking agenda, as is today's webinar. So I think, Camille, did we have any other announcements?
One quick announcement. We had such great response for HousingIs webinar last month that we are just having a follow-up conversation this Thursday. So this is a follow-up conversation from the trauma-informed webinar with Julia Stewart Lomax.
Camille just froze, but oh, you're back. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Follow-up conversation with
Yeah.
Julia Stewart Lomax, and she'll be answering any questions. So if you want to join, I will drop the registration link to get the Zoom information. Otherwise, it'd be great. Anybody who's joining, if you weren't in attendance, you can view the recording on the HousingIs website. And let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that addition. And Camille, if you can also drop a link to the HousingIs working group calendar, just so folks have that kind of top of mind as well. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, our next session in January is one of our biannual update sessions, which is just something we do twice a year to have a chance to kind of popcorn, hear from folks about your cross-sector efforts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters in just a moment, but we're really excited about today. As always, we are recording, so if you miss anything, you want to go back to it, you want to share with a colleague, we will have that available for you soon. And we are going to leave time for questions at the end. If you don't want to forget your question, feel free to put it in the chat at any time and we will make sure to ask it to the presenters at the end. But because we have two different organizations presenting today, we're going to let both of them get through what they have prepared for you, and then we'll do questions after. So I think with that, Ted, are you kicking things off for us? Okay, and our presenters will introduce themselves to you. Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Camille, is that all right?
It looks great.
All right.
Great. So my name is Ted December. I am my title's not on here, I realize, Senior Manager for Educational Initiative and Youth Programs, King County Housing Authority. So you can see here, I'm going to be sharing some of our work that we've been intentional about the last few years in designing and implementing programs with residents at the center and as equitable partners in program development and decision making. So with that, let me dive in. So two examples that I'm going to share. One, if you were at the summit 2 years ago, we co-presented with a partner organization, the Community Builders. And so you've heard a little bit already about our initiative that we have called Neighborhood Early Learning Connectors. So I'll talk briefly about that, and then also briefly about our youth leadership pilot. And so, the thing that really is common between these two programs, even though one is babies and one is kind of adolescent youth, the thing that ties it really together is, the approach to the design, how we've entered into this space and tried to create community with those that we're serving and co-designing and co-creating with. Um, so I just wanted to share this little snippet. So you might saw from my title card. I have an education background, and so a lot of the lens that I use to look at things kind of comes through the education and inequity lens. But I think, as we all know, right, I think housing is very much parallel to that. So it's very interchangeable. I think research and ideas that we can implement. So that's the lens that I'm using, and so I want to bring this into the conversation. It's a guide that I use and my team uses. Um, so this is from Anne Ishimaru's book, Dr. Ishimaru's book called Just Schools. It's building equitable collaborations with families and communities. This is a snippet that I think kind of helps to articulate succinctly the big ideas that she's trying to present throughout the book, and that we're trying to internalize and improve, reflect, and continually improve and implement throughout our work. But it's really the shift from entering into spaces and with those that we're going to partner with, and right, it's about, really, how are we, as we see here, how are the non-dominant parents, so our families that we're serving in King County Housing Authority, um, um, in this example, you could see in a conventional partnership, and I've led partnerships like this, even in my role at KCHA, is, our parents and families are clients and beneficiaries of the work that we do. And oftentimes, right, we're in a room off to the side having conversations or brainstorming. We're writing grants. We're doing all of these things, and it's for someone versus what that might look like as bringing them into the space early on, even having conversations around what funding and grants should we even be applying for. Is that meaningful to what they want to do as an individual and as a family? So taking non-dominant parents and families as educational leaders who contribute and help shape the agenda. So like I said, this, I won't read through them all, but you can see here it's kind of a clear road marker as I think about it, in terms of, like, how are we acting, how are we engaging into spaces. And I think, it's the other piece I guess I want to highlight is, um, it's not only coming in and having this approach at the beginning and inviting folks in to be co-designers and thought partners. I think if we leave it at that, it's kind of perpetuating and continuing what we've done in the past. It just looks a little different. It's really around, how are those folks that we are bringing in and trying and creating community with, how are they continue their participation in the work, and so that it's not, again, it doesn't kind of become a transactional one and done type thing. How do the groups that have formed as part of the co-design, how do they continue to participate and be a part of the work? So I think that's another piece I just want to throw in there, to be thoughtful about, as we're engaging, doing this kind of co-designing type work, We also have to think about like kind of the what's next and bringing those folks along as part of the journey. And I'll highlight a little bit of that in just a second. So quickly moving on. So our program, the Early Learning Initiative, even this I've shared is not the most clean, perfect example of co-designing because as an institution, I still walked into a space knowing kind of with some parameters, like I had a specific funder that had to work on a specific thing. So with those kind of constraints, we entered into it as open as we could. And essentially, what we asked the community, not in so many words, but essentially what we asked them was like, hey, I have this money from this funder. It says we have to help get kids ready for kindergarten, for kindergarten readiness. Um, what does that look like? How do we do that? And that was the invitation really that we invited for our residents. So we had two processes going at the same time in Kent and in Bellevue, so different parts of King County, um, different makeup of our families, kind of racially and language as well, culturally. The residents were invited to this series of meetings. We compensated them. They got gift cards and we paid them hourly. So we would mail them checks. The results of it were, we went through a factor analysis process. So they helped us synthesize and determine, kind of what next steps were, what were the priorities that were coming up from the community. They helped us create a job and a program description for the program. And so we've implemented it in a number of sites. We're going to be expanding, and that's something that we're figuring out right now too, is like, how do you expand a program that was designed and rooted in the community context for which they were. So so that's kind of what we're working on right now. And so the other piece of what we've done is we are hiring our residents to be these early learning connectors. Some of them, so two ladies in the back here are actually connectors right now. So they've been with us since the initial co-design process in 2019, as when we first started these conversations through implementation, and now they are actually program staff. And we continue to the part I was talking about, not leaving, leaving the process behind and bringing folks with us. So these planning groups continue to meet periodically, and we're bringing data back, we're sharing progress, we're getting their insights, we're curious of what suggestions they have. And that's interesting because the makeup of that group has continued to shift. People have moved out. So the people that are there now, there's very few that were there at the beginning, but the groups still do exist. So we're hiring. So out of all of that work, we have 7 resident connectors. They're working about 20 hours a month. With our MTW flexibility, we're able to disregard that income. We have a lead connector who's also a resident working 80 hours, and that's actually going to go up in 2024. We have languages and staff that speak and represent the culturally English, Somali, Arabic, Spanish, and Farsi languages. So it's very diverse. It's representative of the communities, of their neighbors. That was a key component of the program design from our residents. These are just some outcomes. I guess I'm running out of time. But a big piece of what we're doing is basic resource, making sure that families have very basic things. That was something we were hearing from our families and that our connectors were learning from families, particularly I think the last year and a half with the economy even being worse than had been. So essentials like diapers, baby wipes, and shoes and backpacks for going back to school or going into kindergarten. All of these things are um, uh, pieces that we've developed partnerships, and our connectors are actually delivering um, bags once a month um, that have these supplies, activities. Um, the connectors are bringing families together, so 0 to 5 families, creating opportunities like on the weekends or in the evenings or in the summertime, not so much in the winter, but in the evening, come outside and families getting together with their small kids and building connections with each other. Um, So the next piece I want to share is just again following that same trend, one not trend, but that model, that example that I put out at the beginning of, kind of shifting how we're partnering, a realization and for our team internally was, we put out a pretty large financial investment every year in our out of school time programs. So we have 7 different providers at 16 different sites providing after school programs Monday through Friday. It's a large investment and over $1 million. And the reality is, this is going into an education initiative that is intended to support the educational outcomes and support academic success for students, but yet they don't have any say in how that money is spent. And so as an institution, how, me as the leader of these programs and of this funding, how that, I feel like we could probably do better in that regard of how are we asking youth? How are we incorporating youth voice, talking to families? What's the opportunities for families and youth to engage in conversation with us around what a youth and education initiative looks like? And so we have a vision that's down the road of a true equitable type roundtable type scenario of families, youth, my staff, you know, working and thinking together around what are the investment if KCHA is going to invest money into this, what should that investment look like? Are they out of school time programs or are they not? Maybe it's a different provider. I don't know, who knows. I think what could be out there, and so our realization was that seems like a really far leap to get from where we are now, where there's really no organized youth advisory committees or at least for my purposes, like a family committee or family advisories or anything like that. And so what we've done is engaged with youth to think about how can we start building capacity across our 16 out of school time sites for youth to be able to serve in this leadership advisory council type role. And so to do this, we engaged in another co-design process. So we went to 6 of our sites out of the 16 that I've been mentioning, and we followed a very similar process. It was very conversational based. It was they were with us through every step of the process. So we took data through our conversations, and then we would have another conversation just to talk about, well, what does that mean and how do we synthesize that and present it out to the next step. So youth came along with us for the journey of like, how do you determine when you're working on a project, what are priorities, what is this idea of factor analysis? I don't know if they remember it now, but in the moment they learned those types of processes and things along with us. And so we've had parent and youth meetings after the initial design, to kind of say, hey, here's what we're hearing. How does this sound? Does this feel like something that families and youth would want to participate in? And now we're working with youth and two of our providers to kind of finalize the co-design process of what this, it's going to be a 8-month-ish long. So it'll happen once a year at a few of our sites, and we're still kind of developing it as we go. But it's going to be kind of a service leadership model program where the youth are going to get a budget essentially, and through the curriculum, they're going to be kind of figuring out what they want to do together to enhance, support their neighbors and their community. So that might be like having a summertime event. That might be having a guest speaker come in and do a series of things. That might be wanting to build a covered bus stop so they don't have to stand out in the rain for the bus, but they're going to work together as youth to kind of figure that out. And just on my last note, so like, what are we all doing this for? It really comes down to, so this is a kind of a blueprint logic model that a lot of us at KCHA use. And if you look to the kind of outcomes and impact side of what we're trying to do, right? KCHA youth and programs, really driven by youth. So, we're offering programs that are in response to them, helped. Some of them might even been co-designed by them. Um, we're also thinking about, how are they supporting our funding recommendations and being a part of the table, so to speak, when we're talking about those funding mechanisms as well. And then the community, overall, so our properties, having those youth more input, and essentially, what we're hoping is that it would, have that kind of impact on the property of maybe over time we'll see less vandalism or less graffiti or those types of things over the long run. If we can think about how we get youth to actually be a participant in the community, and um, help us, I think, we want them to care about the properties as much as we care about the properties. And so how do we create that? So I'm at time, and I've said a lot, so I can take questions, but I hope these two models were just, again, just examples, models, kind of sharing where we're at in our progress and kind of how I'm thinking about it, and how we're trying to roll it out. But with that, I will stop my share.
Thanks, Ted. That was great. Resident leadership is really an important aspect to also racial equity, because people have such different experiences and the intersection of identities, that it's so important to have people to be able to speak for themselves when we are doing our programming. So with that, I believe Shali is next, also from King County Housing Authority.
Yes. Okay. And just so y'all know, my screen, I'm going in and out during Ted's presentation. So apologies in advance if that happens during my presentation, but I think I should be good to go. So similar to Ted, I'm going to highlight an initiative that we've been working on at King County Housing Authority that we tried to really center around resident voice. And so my name is Shali, Resident Services, County Housing Authority. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to talk to you about the resident services of your strategic planning process. So I
Shelley,
know that a
sorry.
lot of, oh,
Real quickly,
yes.
you're coming in and out a little bit. Why don't you turn off your video while you present? That will probably help with your internet. There we go.
All right, thanks, Camille. um, so at Resident Services at King Housing Authority, our mission is to listen to, understand, and connect residents to available resources and the opportunities so they can live more successful lives. And so we leave success open. So that is to be determined by the participant. Our services are voluntary, it's not prescriptive, and it's really dependent on what an individual family wants for themselves. And you know, at King County Housing Authority, we have a department of about 40 staff in resident services, so it's a pretty large department. We hold service coordination, community building, health initiatives, workforce development, reasonable accommodations, support for our tenant-based voucher holders. So a lot of different things going on in our resident services department. However, this department has grown organically over the course of for 20 years. We've kind of added things on as needs arose, as we got funding for different things. But a driving force of resident service in the past has been really prioritizing needs of the company. And we've been getting pulled in a lot of different directions, which I'm sure many of you can identify. And when we are thinking about the need for a strategic plan for the department, which we hadn't done before, it was an opportunity to center around our participant voice and a participant experience, which had been missing in the past. A quick overview of our project. We actually contracted with a partner called the Athena Group. They have done a lot of strategic planning projects for folks, but what they're really known for is robust community engagement throughout the process. And the reason I put this on here is I just wanted to highlight this section that says develop inclusive engagement plan. And then this section that says conducting and having feedback, that's more than half of the plan. And this actually took us more than a year. And so we really spent over half a year really focusing on how to come up with an inclusive engagement plan and then conducting the actual engagement. And here's what some of those engagement groups were. So we, of course, talked to our internal customers, so other departments in county housing were like construction, section 8, property management, social impact, which is the department that Ted is housed in. We talked to our external partners, some of whom we contract with formally and others who we don't contract with, but just have really strong relationships with. And then we also did a national scan. Some of your housing authorities we reached out to learn from about what resident services department does. And then the part I wanted to focus on for this presentation is the engagement that we did with the participants. And we focused on our section 8 participants and then folks who live in our public housing apartments. And so those are both of our federally subsidized housing programs. And for all of these groups, we did surveys and discussion groups. And for the participant groups, we actually had over 1,200 surveys returned to us, which is a really high return rate, the highest I know of that of any survey that the King County Housing Authority has done. And then we had 8 discussion groups. So we did by far the most engagement with this customer out of all of our customers. So as far as the engagement surveys that we did use a multi-format survey, which we usually do. We make sure to have paper copies available. We get feedback from folks who work at our senior properties that the seniors tend to do better with completing paper. And then Ted talked about languages, and we in King County actually have one of the most diverse zip codes in the nation, 98178, by language. And so we always make sure to try and have everything accessible for a variety of languages. And I listed our top languages in King County here that we look at every year. And the surveys that we got returned, in addition, besides English, the top languages that got returned for our surveys were Russian and Spanish. And the survey was pretty brief. It was 8 questions. We tried to keep it so it didn't take a large chunk of time. In addition to the paper surveys, we actually mailed the surveys with a self-addressed stamped envelope, so they didn't have to pay to return it. And it was from the Athena group. So that was a big part of the project too. Since a big part of this feedback was about the resident services department, we wanted to remove ourselves from that process. So we had our vendor actually send out and collect and collate all the data so that people could feel comfortable giving transparent feedback. We're very aware that we are often people's landlords or their gatekeeper to services. So we wanted them to be able to offer candid feedback. In addition to the paper surveys, we also had an online survey. So we'd send out flyers about the survey and any newsletters we were sending and rent statements, and there would be a QR code. So if it was easier for someone to complete the survey online, they could do so. And then once they got online, if they wanted to take the survey in a language other than English, they could click a button and get it in one of these top languages. And then for this project, we are also able to offer incentives. For each return survey, the person got a $10 gift card. And then they were also entered into a raffle for a $100 prepaid Visa card. And so I think all of those factors helped us.
Oh no, we might have lost Shali real quickly.
Yeah. We can give her just a couple seconds here, and if not, Cindy, we might go.
We have you back.
Sorry about that. It's been doing this. I think it has to do with the screen sharing function. So I'm not sure where I left off. I was talking to myself. Did you all hear me talk about incentives?
You were just starting to talk about incentives.
Okay, thank you for that. My apologies, everyone.
No worries.
The tech grammar attacking. Right. Oh, that's a violent language. Sorry, Camille.
No problem.
Full force right now on my computer, so thank you for bearing with me. So we were also able to offer incentives, and for every return survey, we gave folks a $10 gift card, and then we also entered them into a raffle for a $100 prepaid Visa card. And so I think combined with all those different strategies, was why we got that large return rate. In addition to the we also had discussion groups, and by far we had the most discussion groups for participants. So we had 8 discussion groups that they could self-select into, and these were the different discussion topics we wanted to hear from, and people could participate in as many as they wanted. They self-identified. We encouraged them to participate in the one they most identified with, but they could do multiple. And it's because we really wanted to have a small enough group that we could get a robust conversation going. And we actually had 2 participants co-design the discussion groups with our consultant. So I pulled 2 participants from our resident advisory committee, one who is a Section 8 voucher holder and one who is a public housing resident, and both who happen to be individuals living with disabilities. And they met without King County Housing Authority staff multiple times with the Athena group to design the discussion group questions and facilitate the conversations. And then they were also given an opportunity to review all the reports before they were submitted to the King County Housing Authority, just to make sure the Athena group didn't miss anything important that they wanted to make sure was highlighted. And then they also were compensated at the same rate. So our 2 participant leads and the Athena group facilitator, they were all paid the same hourly wage. And so it's really important to us that we value experience and expertise properly. And so the result is that we have this 5-year strategic plan. I won't share the whole thing with you, but these are our high-level goals. We came up with 3. One is about equitable access, which Ted talked quite a bit about in his presentation. One is about safe, healthy, thriving communities. One is about workforce development and economic independence. And the other one is about having a sense of stability, ownership, and control over their lives, all really focused and centered around the participant experience. And we're actually in the process right now of finalizing our activities for 2024 that all, each of these have strategic objectives under them, and then annual activities. So that's where we're at right now with this project. And then I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but here's my contact information if anyone would like to reach out. So thank you.
Charlie, will you drop your contact information into the chat as well?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Well, we're going to be holding questions till all of our presenters have presented. So we're going to have Cindy from Pittsburgh join us next, and I have your slides ready to go. So let me just go ahead and get that sharing.
So while we're waiting on that, I am going to be very brief. My name is Cynthia McLeod. I'm the Choice Neighborhood Initiatives Manager for the Housing Authority City of Pittsburgh. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about RABs. First, I wanted to discuss HACP. Currently, we service 20,000 residents. We manage about 2,200 public housing units and provide oversight to an additional 600 plus mixed finance units. We have a RAB, and it consists of tenant council representation and residents who are in the voucher program. Our RAB assist us with the development of annual reports. They make recommendations. They make these recommendations on occupancy, how rents are determined or collected, how rents, I'm sorry, I lost my space. Grievance procedures, resident programs and services, as well as budgets. We meet on a monthly basis. We carry meeting minutes. The RAB will receive the meeting minutes after each meeting to go over if they have any changes, they'll let us know that there's changes. The RAB has the opportunity at each meeting to hear and make comments to resolutions that are presented to the HACP Board of Commissioners. And that's pretty much it for that. What is the Resident Advisory Board? First slide. Thank you. The RAB is a group of residents that assist and make recommendations to the PHA annual plan. These recommendations must be included in the final plan when submitted to HUD. HUD mandates that a PHA must establish an RAB. A housing authority can establish one or more RABs as part of the annual plan process and must consider the recommendations of the RAB and make revisions that it deems appropriate. Next slide. Who are the representatives of the Resident Advisory Board? Public housing residents, housing choice and project-based voucher residents or participants that are in good standing representing others who are assisted by the PHA. Where the PHA has a tenant-based assistance or HCV project-based voucher program, if it's more than 20% of HCV holders, the PHA must have a PBV or a housing choice voucher resident on their resident advisory board. Next slide. Why create a resident advisory board? It assures diverse perspectives are included in the PHA's decisions by incorporating policies, protocol, and processes that are responsive to racial, ethnic, and cultural needs. Create meaningful relationships, allow community input on service delivery and planning on the development of effective services. Next slide. What are the PHA's obligations to the RAB? Organizational operations and decisions are conducted with transparency, with the goal of building and maintaining trust. Participants are supported in shared decision-making, choice, and goal setting to determine plans. Next slide. How does the PHA support the RAB? Sufficient time to review and make recommendations, and that's to the annual plans and any resolutions. Advance notice of meetings. Our resident advisory boards are notified at least 2 weeks in advance of a meeting. However, they're given a calendar on a yearly basis. Adequate information about the PHA's programs and policies, meeting minutes, resources to carry out duties. And the resources could be, we've provided our residents with tablets because our meetings are virtual. So therefore they can tap into the meetings through their tablets. But if they need, you know, a laptop, printer, anything, or space to just meet, the PHA must provide that. And that's it for me. Next slide. If you have any questions for the group, but here's my contact information should you have any questions on resident advisory boards. Thank you.
Great. Cindy, I would like to kind of kick off questions. I know you all have a really active resident advisory board. In fact, they were down in DC recently to meet with legislators and to kind of learn a little bit more about what happens in DC. With your resident advisory board, have you had any surprising findings that they've come to you that you weren't thinking about ahead of time that have now kind of been influencing the policies of the PHAs? You know, just anything interesting that they've brought up that you might have not been thinking about ahead of time.
I am going to let the other Cynthia McLeod answer that question if she is still on the line.
She is.
She is. I'm the other Cynthia McLeod, and I'm actually Michelle Sandage, and I'm the Chief Community Affairs Officer for the Housing Authority. And so under that umbrella, we have Community Affairs and we have Resident Services, both of which fall underneath my umbrella. And the question is, did the Resident Advisory Board bring anything to our attention? And most definitely, as a matter of fact, today we just had a Resident Advisory Board meeting.
Right.
And we always have one the Tuesday before our board meeting, which is the fourth Thursday of every month. And we go, as you know, the other Cynthia McLeod said, we go through the resolutions and there are all types of questions. How much money are you spending? You know, what are you doing for this community as opposed to that one? A really good thing that they came up with, which is going to be a universal thing, is when we publicize our board meetings and we put everything on social media and make sure that the media and the public in general know what we're about to talk about at a board meeting. Some of the resolutions did not have the dollar amounts in them. I mean, they talk about the resolution itself and all the good things that are going to happen, but they don't have the dollar amounts in there. They brought that to our attention, and absolutely it should. It also gives the housing authority some recognition just globally as to how much money we're spending for a particular project or program. And so, we're engaged in a lot of choice neighborhood activity. Folks need to know how much money we're actually investing. We have a cool program that's called gap financing that ensures that there's affordable housing in any type of development that happens in the city when it's connected to us. There has to be some affordable units in that development. Well, you need to know how much money we're spending, and you need to know that that money equates to maintaining affordable housing in the city. So that was just one, thing that really came up that was really critical. It was a good marketing tool. It was a really good informational tool. As it relates to safety and security, when we have our resident advisory board meetings, they are very quick to tell us not just about what's happening in their neighborhood, but just on a global perspective. And that was really good when they went to Washington, D.C. Instead of talking about, what you would think residents would be talking about, their personal needs, their toilets and things of that nature, they touched with senators and with Congress people, and they talked to the representatives of Pennsylvania, and they talked about the global issues as it related to crime. And they were talking about doing something on a national level for food and food insecurity. So these are some of the things that they bring to our attention that we pay attention to. They bring the smaller things to our attention and we correct those. And that's like, maybe maintenance isn't coming out, in an adequate, amount of time. But the other thing is the educational and communication piece. And what we found out is that if we actually have these meetings and talk and listen and communicate, they're our greatest champion what we do. We couldn't ask for a better free advertising mechanism. If the residents talk positive about what we're doing, that goes a long way for everything that we're trying to do. And so at the end of the day, that's the really benefit of having a resident advisory board.
That's great. And yeah, I think that's exactly right. If we're delivering the services that people want to see, then they can be the biggest champions, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we had a couple of other quick questions for you too. How many resident participants are on your RAB?
So
14?
our resident,
I think 14.
About 14. Yeah. And those are only the resident presidents, or if the president can't make it, then they'll send a representative. But we have a couple of different, so we have a resident advisory board, and then we also have a tenant council forum, and that invites everybody that's part of your resident council, all the way down to the sergeant at arms, so that we communicate and educate the entire group, not just the top of the food chain with your president, but everybody comes to those meetings as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then another question in the chat. For the RAB members who get tablets, do they get to keep them? And do you all provide any technology assistance for them?
Yes.
Yes.
Which Cynthia do you want to?
So yes, they can keep the tablets. They are connect. We do have a computer or digital literacy program. They are connected to Wi-Fi through that program, and they also receive assistance on how to join a meeting and anything else they need to do on a tablet.
Yeah, we passed out tablets prior to the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And if the pandemic didn't do anything positive, as some people think it didn't, but it did, because it gave us the ability to be able to give tablets to people and not do it on loan, just because everybody was very squeamish. I don't want that back. It's
Right.
Pandemic and COVID. We don't. So that was good, because we could give everybody tablets, and we partnered with Comcast and some other entities, and we were able to, if you're participating in any self-sufficiency programs, you can get a tablet from us. And then we also participated with the Wi-Fi. And so we did the Comcast at Internet Essentials early on. And then we flipped it to the government Wi-Fi program. So not just our residents on the resident advisory board, but residents in general.
Right.
And then we partnered with our Pittsburgh Public School, and we gave about close to 1,500 tablets to every kid who was in public housing and attending the Pittsburgh Public School. And that was a grant that we did through a nonprofit that the Housing Authority has to make sure that everybody was digitally connected. As Cindy said, we have a whole team that does that. We have a mobile cyber bus, so it goes everywhere. And in addition to that, the folks on the bus help everybody. If you don't know how to get on a tablet, they're there to show you how to just turn it on. You'd be surprised. We give people this tablet, and they're like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this thing? So we walk everybody through just the basics, how to turn it on, how to, set up internet, how to set up your email, how to FaceTime your kids or your grandkids, how to do teledoc. All of that stuff was very essential. And the RAB folks are always on their tablets and doing all kind of good stuff with that connection.
Great. Thank you. That was really enlightening. I have heard about you all's digital programs in the past, and they are so wonderful to hear, especially when you hear about students getting, what they need to connect. All right. I had a quick question as well for the KCHA team about resident compensation. This is always a hot topic among our webinars. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And did you have to do anything particular? I heard you used your MTW flexibilities, but did you have any other challenges from HUD in how you were doing the compensation? The answer can be no, but
No, I think no, yeah. So we have existing MTW policy that talks about the compensation of residents that are working for KCHA. And so the exemption, we actually just had it the last year. So I think what was on the slide was even old. I think we increased it by like $100 because it wasn't, that $500 mark was really old. And so it wasn't thinking about COLAs and other things. So we raised that a little bit, but that was what we leveraged, was that existing policy. And so I think those had been used for like more traditional roles. I think like laundry room attendants and those other types of roles, I think, is kind of where they've traditionally come from. And then in terms of like just mailing direct checks, we just had the residents supply their tax information and kept their hours, and then we would, mail them.
In addition to that MTW waiver that Ted's talking about, in 2024, we're putting in income exclusion for folks who participate in employment opportunities or programs. And so we do have a couple other programs in resident services where we're hiring residents as King County Housing Authority staff. So they'll actually be staff, part-time, benefit eligible, paid at the same rate as our staff are. And so that's one way that we're looking at really authentically engaging residents from the start, because we'll hire them to help us design a couple new programs that we're working on. So we have a lot of different ways we're trying to do this.
Thanks. And I am definitely going to be taking a look at your MTW plan to kind of pull out some information there about how you all are doing that.
When we put something really crazy in this year. I don't know if Shali just mentioned that, but we'll share that if it gets approved. But
great, yes, please do. So we have just a few minutes left. Shali and Ted, I do want to ask you one question that I also asked Cynthia, which was, have you all had anything surprising come up through these resident engagement processes? Something that you weren't thinking about before and really changed the way you were approaching your work?
For me, I wasn't surprised, but it really validated a lot of what we already know and have been talking about for a long time. So, for example, aging in place and accessibility needs. And so that's our data team and our health team have known this and been talking about it for years about the aging population. But not until we did our engagement plan and I was able to present on the results did they really take that into consideration with when they're doing unit turns, just putting in hard surface flooring, not making people ask to have their carpet replaced. And so I think it was just this engagement, it was just the data point that put us over the edge on a lot of things that staff have been talking about for a long time. So it actually helped us with our advocacy work within the organization, which is nice to know that people care and they listen to what residents say they need.
Yeah, mine wasn't so much of a surprise, but like or epiphany realization. It's like really at the heart of what we're doing. It's almost community organizing, which people have been doing a long time, right? And so, but with that, you're organizing something, and it needs to be like fed and continued. And I think what's that capacity? Like, I think that was something, we kind of new, but the realization of like, oh my gosh, now we kind of like have this new group that exists, and like, how are they going to keep coming together, and now are we going to facilitate that, and so that was, I think, the thing that, I guess, not really, like I said, a surprise, but the realization of like, oh my gosh, because it impacts your capacity, right? So it's like the more you do this type of work, it's almost like, well, then the more you're in community with folks, and that is work too. And so it's just, I don't know, all things that we're figuring out as we go here.
Fair enough. Sustainability of programs is so hard. I think that's kind of what you're touching on too. Well, thank you all. We are at the top of the hour. Really appreciate everybody's time joining us. I know December is a little hard, but some really great presentations and really great topics. So please let me know if you have any follow-up questions, and I can always get you in contact with our presenters.
Thank you so much,
Thank
to our presenters, and to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.